So on the video today, I'm going to be talking to another expert, and this expert is Andy Caine. Andy Caine is a former GB international 10,000 metre runner, cross-country runner, knows a lot about running. He also knows a lot about business. He worked in the event industry for a long period of time and also was very high up in a retail job as well. So he knows sport inside and out, and I'm speaking to him today because I wanted to get a bit of an insight into how you prepare for a race, some of the methods and ways you can keep your self-control before you do the race itself, and that might be on the lead up to an event in terms of starting your program or on the week before, but it might also be on the event days itself, and Andy's kindly jumped on here today to give a bit of insight into how that can happen. We're going to talk about pre-race nerves today. I know it's something that everyone goes through, but Andy, what's your background, just so everyone knows kind of why you're an expert in this field?
Yeah, because I had a lot of nerves that I needed to deal with. I've spent the last 4 years actually really going into a lot of my own development around emotional regulation basically, and around dealing with highly stressful situations. So, you know me, I came from the event organisation business, the Great North Run, elite athlete management, highly stressful situations, live TV, you were on the teams, I remember back in the day. And then going into business as well, Nike, Puma, Foot Locker, really big corporate roles, a lot of stress. And it really made me wake up and go, do you know what, actually there's better ways I can deal with this, deal with my body, respond better instead of react. So I've spent the last 3 or 4 years really going into all of the ways to become more resilient to stress, to handle my emotions better, to be more responsive, like I said before, instead of reactive. But also as a former international athlete as well, knowing the importance of, you can do all the training and be fully prepped, on the track in your training runs, but when you get the race day, it can all go to pot, right? Yeah. If you haven't got it up here. And the number of stories I've heard of people just like not having it together up here, not just in running, but in all sports. The real sports psychology of keeping it together and being optimum up here on race day, not just in the body. So yeah, that's kind of that's how I've come about it.
No, there's almost like different stages to it, isn't there? Like sometimes for people who watch this, might be just starting out running. There's the pre-starting training, taking your first steps nerves. There's the actual enter the race and it's coming up in a week or two nerves, and then you've got the on the day nerves. And they're kind of three separate things that all need is three separate kind of attitudes towards them.
Yeah.
Like just talking about those three. First of all, the first one there. So taking your first step, starting the training program, starting the tough training block. What are some of the ways that you can get over that anxiety, that nervousness before taking that on?
I guess a lot of it can feel like overwhelm, and it's very, very easy to compare where you are to others and go, oh, look at that person. And it's always linked to inner critic and ourselves, or basically our egos and so on. And this is all to do with mental resilience, is checking ourselves, like what is keeping me small? And things like comparison, looking at a friend or somebody who's been running for ages, it's like, no, be realistic. Don't judge your beginning against somebody else's middle. So that for me was one of my big lessons actually, is starting out in a new venture, starting out anything. It's like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm not comparing myself to others. It's easy to, because the ego wants to compare. But just kind of that is kind of a real starting point mindset, is like, I'm exactly where I need to be. And it's taking small chunks at a time, not trying to, put ambitions out there to win the Olympic gold straight away. It's like, no, tomorrow I'm going to run 1 mile. The next day I'm going to run another mile, and just do a little bit every day. So by the end of the week, you've run 7 miles, and then the following week it's like, I'm going to do a little bit more, that's probably one of the key messages on the early start.
No, definitely, yeah. It takes that first step, and if you're watching your friends on Instagram doing a big marathon and competing and thinking, oh, they broke 4 hours or they broke 5 hours, and you think, I'm going to start my program off and do that, you can't do that. You need to actually scale it back, look at yourself, and then move forward. And it sounds like that's a good method. In terms of the one where you've entered the race, you've done your training block, and you have that nervousness leading up to it, the last week or so, what are some of the ways, some of the techniques, some of the practical techniques that people could potentially do in a down week, I suppose, when they're not training as much? Been training in a block, you have a week taper, essentially.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of energy, you've got a lot of anxiety for the race coming up. what are some of the techniques that you could do potentially at home or potentially outdoors when it's maintaining the energy balance that you've got?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, because I remember when I was racing, I could like overthink a race and because I was thinking about the race too much, I'd be mentally exhausted by the time I got to the race. Because if I create something in my mind or something's really happening, the body doesn't know any different. So it's like either thinking about a stressful situation or a stressful situation really happening, the body thinks it's the same thing and it responds in the same way, releasing adrenaline, releasing dopamine, releasing cortisol, having that stressful response actually in the body. It's a bit like when you wake up from a dream and you've had a bad dream and you wake up all like, geez, what the hell happened there? It didn't happen, but it did, and your body responded accordingly, right? So this whole thing about overthinking a race, if you're too much caught in this event in the future, which hasn't happened yet, but you're making up stories about the race, you're making up stories, maybe you think you're not going to run well, if you're caught in that thought loop, the trick there is actually what can you do to bring your awareness, your attention back to the present moment, instead of time traveling to the race that's a week's time and you're thinking about it and you're worrying about it. So these can be really simple exercises, and anything that basically mindfulness, right? And this is what mindfulness is about, being in the present moment. Anything that brings you into the present moment. Can be focusing on your breath work, can be drinking coffee mindfully, like focusing on the taste, the smell. Anything that you can attach to your senses, because your senses are happening right now. Your senses don't happen in the future. So anything that really locks yourself into the present moment right now is going to pull you away from those thoughts of you traveling into the future and getting stressed about the race. The flip side of that is what you can also do is you can use visualization to actually go through, to with intention, sit down maybe through a meditation visualization where you can sit and go, right, I'm going to run my race as I want it to run in a positive way. So you sit down, go into meditation, and you visualize yourself running the race as you want to run it in a positive way. And the more you do that, the more then it becomes almost like a reality, because as you can create a bad situation from a thought and the feelings, you can also create good feelings from a good thing. Yeah. So it works both ways, right? But we get caught up too much in the negative. So yeah, there's kind of the positive and negative. So visualizations to run your race in the way you want to run it, which gets you to race day, and actually research suggests that it does help performance in that way. And then the flip side is too much, like anxiety around thinking about the result. Get into meditation, get into cold showers in the morning, get into mindfulness, breath work, yoga, anything that brings you into the moment. Go for a run. Yeah. But focus on the feelings, the senses, the sounds, the smells, the taste. Don't go for a run and think about the run.
Yeah. I suppose like in that last week build up to the big thing you've been trying to do, there is that sort of stuff. Would you put in these cold showers, these visualizations throughout the training process, or would you put it in just at the end part? Like how would you integrate that into what you do in a training plan?
Yeah, I think so. Visualizations for me are certainly ramp them up nearer the event, because you don't want to. Again, it's like fatigue as well. Visualization fatigue. Like if you're on an 8-week program, like visualizing every day, like because it creates time as well. You've got to be realistic on what time people have got. So if it's going to be a visualization meditation, then start bringing it in towards maybe the 2-3 weeks out. And again, you'll find what works best for you. Some people might be like, I've got to think about all the time. I got to run this race a million times. So yeah, there's that aspect. Cold for me, I cold every day. And when I've got an ice bath at home, and I've been doing that for 9 weeks, and it has had a multitude of benefits, not just the fact it brings me in the present moment, physiologically it's amazing, and there's all the other, especially training as well, cold on for endurance, cold on reducing inflammation, improving recovery, that just works wonders as well, so you guys can do that.
How many minutes would you go in for?
Yeah, so the current research for cold to have positive effects is 11 minutes a week. Okay. Now, so that you chunk that up how you want to do it. I do 4 minutes every day, so I'm a little bit out there, but the minimum requirement is 11 minutes. So you can do if it's a shower in the morning through the 5-day working week, and then some longer stuff at weekends. That's what's currently been proven to have the positive effect. Yeah.
So would you recommend doing that for the first time right before a major race, or would you leave it until afterwards.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it put it this way, it's not going to have a detrimental effect. I wouldn't do it on the morning of the race, because you don't want to do anything that's completely brand new, like anything, like running, we've been running for years, we know it, right? You don't change your routine up, but it's certainly not going to have a detrimental effect. But just introducing something new into your routine, try and do it maybe more in the training phase than maybe your last preparation.
No, yeah, that's interesting. And just finally, in terms of the race day itself, like, I know this is a major thing for people, trying to find ways to calm down, to relax on the actual day. And today we actually went through one of your workshops, which you do on a regular basis with lots of companies, businesses around the UK. But some of the tools that you taught today to some of the operational staff at Run Through, the breathing exercises. Can you give a bit of insight into that and how that would be beneficial to do potentially on a race day to calm those nerves?
Yeah, so exactly that. So you get to race day, obviously you're feeling excited, there's the emotions of the approaching start line, the starting gun, the performance, you've done all this training, you're in a heightened state of alertness, of awareness, of arousal, if you want to call it that. But obviously the trick is not to become hyper over aroused, and then it affects performance, right? And that's what pre-race jitters are. And there's a difference between pre-race jitters and performance anxiety. Anxiety is prolonged over a long period of time. Pre-race jitters are literally, you wake up in the morning, you're feeling good, you feel a little bit nervous, but it's okay, and then you get towards the start line and the nerves are starting to build, and then the gun goes and they're gone. Because literally it's like the gun goes and you're there and then you're off. So the pre-race jitters is actually a good thing, because it's what they call eustress. You have two types of stress, eustress and distress. And eustress is a good type of stress which activates us, energizes us to action. So in the morning, for example, when you wake up in the morning, the body activates all its systems to get going, and that's called a eustress stimulus on the body. And what I mean by that is, the heart rate starts pumping faster, the blood starts to get pumped to the big muscle groups, because it's the body's getting ready for action, which, so for some people who aren't used to it, feels a bit like, oh, I don't like this jittery feeling, right? Because you're really tuning your body, and that's the function of the body getting ready for the gun. Because what do you need ready for the gun? You need your blood going to your big groups, you need your heart pumping, you need alertness, you need adrenaline, you need dopamine, making you ready and focused on the task at hand, which is to run. So you don't want to be super chilled out when the gun goes, because you'd be like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm supposed to be running here, and you're like, because your heart rate's slow and your blood pressure's dropped, and no, you want to be going. So it's a good thing, and that's it, flipping the perspective. But if you really feel like hyper over the top, then this is where simply just something as some easy breathwork exercises, and the easiest thing to remember is, if you're feeling anxious or like I keep using the word over aroused, almost like too much over the top, then just make sure your exhales are longer than your inhales. And if you breathe using your belly, so I always like to say you breathe in through the nose for 4 and exhale for 8. And if you can, try and use your diaphragm, fill up your belly, fill up your lungs with your belly diaphragm. That again is attached, is associated with activating the vagus nerve, which again is attached to your parasympathetic nervous rest and digest side of the nervous system. So then the breath activates that, which calms you down and brings you down. And the longer exhale as well, as the diaphragm moves up, it reduces the volume of the heart. The brain then thinks, oh, my heart rate's going up, I need to slow it down, so the brain starts to slow down. All these things all interlinked, like super easy. So just remember, short inhale, long exhale, short inhale, long exhale, and a 4 and an 8, 4 and an 8.
Perfect. No, that's really interesting. And so you've got these workshops, like I mentioned before. Can you give a bit of insight and maybe some handles, URL handles, that sort of stuff to your work, so we can share it with everyone who's watching today? Yeah,
thanks. So I can be found, my corporate work, business relationships, through inthenowhow.com. And then my Instagram handle is Passage of Men, and that's actually part of my work is focused really on men's mental health, men's resilience, positive masculinity. That's why I've got the two there. So inthenowhow.com for my corporate workshops, experiences, wellbeing strategies, and then Passage of Men on Instagram.
So that was Andy Caine, and that was another Meet the Expert. You can find out more about Andy on Instagram, Passage of Men. And for myself, I'm at Matt Woodywood on all the channels, and for Run Through, runthrough.co.uk.